It is 8:13 a.m. Pacific Daylight Time. It is the 7th day of August, 2026. This is episode 1368 of Bitcoin, and yeah, I might have gotten myself a sponsor. Oh yeah. In these trying times of death and deliberation about Cold Card and the assholes that are set against us in all fronts, to destroy our lives and take what is ours. I just had to reach out and go grab myself a sponsor. You know what? I'm just going to let the sponsor speak for themselves right here.
For years, the market rewarded those who knew things first. They called it illegal. Not anymore. Introducing Truth API. Tariffs at 2 a.m., you're already short. A pardon for a major shareholder, you bought at the open. Restarting the Iran war, you'll know first. Truth API. It's not insider trading when the insider sells you the feed. Just $100,000 a month, which, let's be honest, you'll make back by Tuesday. Truth API. It's fucked up, but real. Not available to poor people.
That's funny. Yeah. So it's been all over Twitter. It's actually pretty well done, honestly, considering that it's, clearly AI as far as I can tell. But it's a short 30-second video that is, like I said, all over X or Twitter or whatever the hell it is now. And it really has captured the look of the 1980s. So, there is a place for AI produced media like this, because like jingles and little short stuff. I mean, I honestly think that if it's done well, if it's at the hands of a human being that is able to actually have some kind of vision for what they want a video to be, that's going to be AI generated or whatever, that it, some of them actually turn out pretty good. And this one, I got to admit, man, this one's actually not all that bad. Clearly, it is a jab at Truth Social and the early access that Trump was giving people, or is, I guess, still giving people. I have no idea if it's really $100,000 a month, and I don't care. I just thought it was damned funny. All right, so we've got news about Clarity Act. We've got stuff going on with the BIP 110 because that is coming up. Senators, for whatever reason, are not seem to be as concerned about the Clarity Act like they say they are, but they are very concerned about prediction markets. So we'll talk about that. The yen. I've talked about this a couple of days. I just found a piece of news about what the U.S. Treasury's intervention into the yen actually looked like, and it completely affected another region of the world. And I didn't hear anybody else talk about it, but I got this piece from the Financial Times. Right as we go into running the numbers, we're going to talk about the United States jobs report. It dropped. And in the second part of the show, we will be talking about the end of closed source. Are we heading into a new era? God, I hope so. Russia, remember I told you yesterday that Putin signed that regulation about crypto into law? Yeah, well, as of this morning, they put that shit into action. We'll give you the news about it. Kimi K3 broke out of its Sandbox and I guess walked around and reached for stuff. And then OpenAI has a little report about how their agents, or rather some AI agents, coordinated before the Hugging Face attack. So I guess they all had a little powwow. But first, let's do this one. The Clarity Act has been pushed. I figured it was going to be pushed. Ezra Reguera is going to tell us about how far down the line we're looking at the Clarity Act from Cointelegraph. U.S. Senate pushes Clarity Act vote to September. Senate Republican leaders are expected to leave for their August recess without voting on crypto market structure legislation, delaying consideration of the bill until at least September, according to a report from Politico. John Thune, Senate Majority Leader, confirmed that the chamber is not going to vote on the legislation before this recess, citing Democratic opposition and saying that it would be prioritized when senators return next month. Quote, "The Dems are insistent on no clarity vote. I worked with sponsors of the bill. Senator Lummis was great, and we're getting that queued up first thing when we come back." Oh, yeah, it's going to be the first thing that they do. Sure, everything's going to be fine. The postponement leaves one of the crypto industry's top legislative priorities unresolved and compresses the Senate's timetable for advancing the bill. Without sufficient Democratic support, Republicans may struggle to secure the 60 votes generally needed to overcome a filibuster. Crypto Council for Innovation CEO Ji-Hoon Kim called the postponement disappointing, but said that the direction of the legislation had not changed. Quote, "Every day without such a framework pushes American users and builders offshore and leaves consumers at risk," Kim said in comments provided to Cointelegraph. Thune's remarks came after comments from Senate Banking Committee Chair Tim Scott, who said on Thursday that the chamber should hold its first vote on the Clarity Act before the recess without any question. Scott said Thune still had time to schedule the procedural vote and that Republicans were gaining support for it. The Clarity Act would establish a federal framework for digital asset markets and clarify how oversight is divided between the SEC and the Commodity Futures Trading Commission. Citing 3 people with knowledge of the matter, Politico reported that the Clarity Act lacks Democratic support and negotiations remain underway. Thune may still file cloture before the recess, however. This procedural step could position the bill for a vote when senators return in mid-September, but it would not constitute a vote on the actual legislation. Cointelegraph also asked Thune's office to confirm whether he intended to file cloture before the Senate leaves for recess, but hasn't received a response by time of publication. The sources said Democrats have declined to approve a time agreement that would expedite the Senate's remaining pre-recess business and allow the crypto bill to reach the floor. According to the report, Republican leaders would need unanimous consent from all 100 senators to complete the outstanding items without extending the session deep into next week. Oh, what are they not wanting to work? I'm so sorry for all the senators and all the people in Congress that they want to go home. I honestly, I don't give a shit anymore. If they were, normal people, yeah. You definitely deserve vacations and time off. But these guys, I'm just done with all of the Congress and the people in Washington, D.C. I think the removal or the span of distance between Washington, D.C. folks and the rest of not only the American public, but the world is the distance is so great. I don't care if they get a vacation or a raise or anything ever again. But we've got other fish to fry, and its name is BIP 110. There's 3 possible scenarios, according to Aaron Von Werdum out of Bitcoin Magazine. The op return debate has escalated to the point where Bitcoin Knots implemented BIP 110, a consensus protocol change that temporarily limits the size of op returns and intends to reduce other types of data on Bitcoin's blockchain as well. However, BIP 110 does not have consensus. Not everyone agrees there's a problem that requires solving in the first place, nor that BIP 110 solves it in any meaningful manner while it restricts Bitcoin in potentially harmful ways. Most obviously, Bitcoin Core, still by far the most used Bitcoin implementation, has not adopted BIP 110, while only some 1 to 2% of hash power has been signaling support for it in recent weeks. Nevertheless, BIP 110 nodes like Bitcoin knots will soon, starting from block 961632, to be mined on or around August the 8th, that would be tomorrow, reject blocks that don't signal support for the upgrade. Here are the three main scenarios and how each could play out. Scenario 1, almost no miner signal. If current miner signaling is any indication, this is the scenario to expect. From the perspective of anyone running Bitcoin Core or other non-BIP 110 enforcing nodes and wallets, the vast majority of the Bitcoin ecosystem at this time, blocks will be mined as usual and transactions will be processed as normal. Anyone who's not actively tracking these events on social media or elsewhere may not even be aware that anything unusual is going on, and in a practical sense for them, there really won't be, because BIP 110 does not affect them. The same is not true for anyone running Bitcoin knots or other BIP 110 enforcing nodes. Since their software will reject non-signaling blocks, they basically wouldn't see any new blocks at all, or perhaps a few per week. And incoming and outgoing transactions won't confirm, or confirm incredibly slow. In practical terms, these nodes would stall and basically become unusable. If this happens, BIP 110 proponents will have to decide between waiting to see if things improve, giving up, or deploying a next protocol change like hard forking to a different proof of work mining algorithm altogether. Well, such a hard fork would possibly allow for mining with GPUs again, therefore letting more people mine new blocks to generate a blockchain with the BIP 110 rules enforced. However, this would also mean that BIP 110 hard fork nodes permanently split off from the rest of the Bitcoin ecosystem to essentially create, yet again, a brand new cryptocurrency. Scenario 2, almost all miners signal. This is the scenario several prominent BIP 110 proponents predict. In this scenario, when the mandatory signaling window starts, all miners will suddenly signal for BIP 110, or at least a majority of miners will signal and reject any non-signaling blocks so that all blocks that end up in the blockchain include a BIP 110 signal. Well, if this happens, all Bitcoin nodes, knots and core alike, remain compatible. And the signals in the blocks indicate that miners plan to start enforcing the BIP 110 rules 2 weeks later. BIP 110 violating transactions should by early September no longer end up confirmed in blocks. In essence, this is the success scenario for BIP 110, although only a small fraction of developers, miners, and users pushed for it. The upgrade goes into effect across the entire network. However, even in this scenario, there is an important caveat. Blockchain signaling is a useful coordination mechanism for soft fork deployment, but it technically does not guarantee that the new rules will actually be enforced. Miners can signal support for the upgrade without actually using BIP 110 software, which they, for example, could elect to do simply to ensure their blocks aren't rejected by Bitcoin knots nodes during the mandatory signaling window. Bitcoin's protocol rules are ultimately enforced by economic nodes, however, and nothing currently indicates that most of these will enforce the BIP 110 rules, even if all blocks include a signal. So, if BIP 110 violating transactions are later accepted by most miners regardless, these economic nodes would accept blocks that include them, while BIP 110 nodes would not. The blockchain would split between nodes that do and do not enforce BIP 110 after all. Scenario 3. A sizable minority of miners signal. This is the scenario that would immediately split the chain. Currently, some 2% of miners signal support for BIP 110, which is probably too little to be meaningful. But let's imagine this quickly increases tenfold or so. We also have to imagine that this sizable minority itself rejects any non-signaling blocks, else it would still be indistinguishable from scenario number 1, where BIP 110 nodes stall. If the sizable minority is both signaling and rejecting non-signaling blocks, they'd start to build their own minority blockchain with only signaling blocks in it. Blocks on this minority chain would confirm significantly slower than usual, maybe just 1 or 2 per hour, but BIP 110 nodes remain reasonably usable. And after a few months, the mining difficulty would adjust, so blocks are found 6 times per hour again, and another couple of weeks later, the BIP 110 rules would then go into effect. Meanwhile, Bitcoin Core and other non-BIP 110 enforcing nodes would still operate fairly normally as well. Their blocks will confirm a little bit slower for a while, maybe about 4 or 5 per hour, but after a couple of weeks, mining difficulty adjusts here too, to also bring this back to 6 per hour on average. The BIP 110 rules would never go into effect on this blockchain. As a result, a BIP 110 blockchain and a blockchain with the original rules would then exist side by side as 2 different cryptocurrencies indefinitely. There's one notable caveat in this scenario as well. If the BIP 110 chain were to overtake the original chain in length later on, due to miners moving to the BIP 110 chain, all nodes, core and knots alike, would accept the BIP 110 chain as the only chain. The original chain would, in this case, be discarded or wiped out. This one-sided wipeout risk is in fact why BIP 110 proponents expect all miners to signal preemptively, preventing a split. Miners won't want to mine a block on a blockchain that can later be discarded, they argue, as that would also mean losing all block rewards that they earned on that. In actuality, users and miners that want to prevent the original chain can get wiped out could do so. However, they can manually invalidate any block on the minority BIP 110 chain while it still is the minority chain. This way, their nodes would reject switching to it even if it becomes longer at any point in the future, making the split permanent as well. If and when the Bitcoin blockchain permanently splits, it essentially marks the creation of a new cryptocurrency or fork coin. Everyone who owns BTC at the time of the split automatically receives the equivalent amount of coins on the new blockchain, not unlike what happened with Bitcoin and Bitcoin Cash in 2017. However, in reality, these things aren't necessarily as straightforward. And if BIP 110 does cause a chain split under any of the scenarios above, there will likely be some complications. For one, there will almost certainly be disagreement over which side of the chain represents actual Bitcoin with the BTC ticker, and which side is the new fork coin. It seems likely, however, that the blockchain with the original rules will by most people be considered Bitcoin, whereas the blockchain with the BIP 110 rules will be called something else. Let's call it BIP 110 coin for now. Accessing the BIP 110 coins then will require BIP 110 specific software like indeed Bitcoin knots. The new coins won't show up on Bitcoin Core nodes or most wallets. However, BIP 110 does not currently include replay protection. This is important. This means that transactions on one chain can be copied, otherwise known as replayed, on the other chain. Instead of just sending BTC, users could unknowingly also send the equivalent BIP 110 coin to an identical address on the BIP 110 chain, or vice versa. It's difficult to estimate at this point how much the fork coins would be worth, or even if they will be worth anything at all. The lack of interest in buying BIP110 coins via fork future contracts does suggest that there may not be much interest to buy them after a split either. But if you nevertheless want to be sure you'll receive BIP110 coins if there are any, it's probably best to self-custody your Bitcoin. Have access to your own private keys. And don't send any transactions until the dust settles and there is more clarity on how to proceed. And that's the end of the article. So here we are back in 2017. Because by God Almighty, this sounds almost exactly like all the shit that went on with the Bitcoin Cash fork. No replay protection at first, arguments as to who was going to be able to capture the BTC ticker symbol. What is it Peter Pan says? Or the book anyway. All this has happened before, and all this will happen again. It just doesn't ever stop. It just doesn't ever fucking stop, man. Let's see, I've got something highlighted here. I'm trying to figure out why. Bitcoin's protocol rules are ultimately enforced by, economic nodes. Again, that's language. Okay, let me read the sentence first. Bitcoin's protocol rules are ultimately enforced by economic nodes, however, and nothing currently indicates that most of these will enforce the BIP110 rules, even if all blocks include a signal. Okay, the notion of economic nodes. This brings back an old argument, again, from 2017, where your node doesn't really matter because you're not a mining node. Your node isn't attached to a substantial amount of mining, so therefore your node doesn't matter. Then, just as now, I call bullshit. Running a Bitcoin full node is how we keep the system running. Because you can consider my node that is not attached to a whole set of miners that I might have in a basement somewhere. It still validates transactions. It still records those transactions as they are contained in the blocks that have been mined. I have a full copy from the Genesis block on of the entirety of Bitcoin's history on my node. I am receiving transactions. I am helping transmit transactions. It's ridiculous to go back this far in time to 2017. It's just, please stop. Please stop. Now, do I want BIP110 or do I not want BIP110? At this point, I don't fucking care. What I do care about is being called a pedophile by Luke Dasher, because I basically am saying, look, man, here's my standpoint. You're about to make a transaction, and you're constructing that transaction with however it is you're going to construct that transaction. You're going to send Bitcoin to some other wallet, is essentially what I mean. You're going to send 0.01 Bitcoin somewhere. I don't care where. Your friend, you're going to, send it to Strike to turn it into dollars so you can pay a bill. I don't care. You're constructing a transaction. Does the transaction conform to the consensus rules of Bitcoin as we know it and as we have always known it? If the answer to that question is yes, then it's a valid transaction. I don't necessarily need somebody saying, well, your transaction might just contain something like, child sexual explicit material or whatever, CSAM. I don't know exactly what it's, child sexual, whatever, something like that. I might be putting like child porn into my transaction. That's a matter for law enforcement. That is illegal. I would rather it not be, associated with the Bitcoin chain. Okay, I can say that. But I have to go like one level up, and is it a valid transaction no matter what I put into op return? If it conforms to the consensus rules of Bitcoin, then it is a valid transaction, and my node is going to see it and stamp it as a valid transaction when it comes into my node's mempool, because every node has its own mempool. I don't want the CSAM there. I don't want ordinals and inscriptions there. I don't like any of this stuff. But I'm not going to start saying, well, some transactions are valid or some transactions are more valid than others, right? I don't want to get into a 1984 or, Animal Farm type dystopian scenario where some people can start changing the rules and writing new rules on the side of the barn. And if you have not read Animal Farm from George Orwell, I highly recommend that you read it. It's actually a pretty good book. That's one of the reasons why it's so famous, is that it's actually a pretty good book. That's my standpoint. I don't necessarily not like Luke Dash Jr. or the rest of the BIP 110 crew because they don't like CSAM. What I don't like about him is that I'm feeling that this CSAM, this child sexual explicit material or whatever, I'm starting to see it as a red herring. That they're not really saying that because this is the impetus for everything. I think it is a handy argument to make against people who are saying, look, man, I don't like spam either, but, hey, it's a valid transaction. We get called pedophiles. That's what we get called. And, if I'd actually asked on Twitter, is it valid for me to think that this is, technically legally liable when they say that I'm a pedophile without actually providing any proof that I'm a pedophile? Sadly, it's not liable unless I'd actually be able to calculate in a monetary way damages done to my reputation. Like, I would have to be making like $100,000 a year on Twitter, through their monetization process. And then after I got called pedophile like 50 times in a row by Luke Dash Jr., my monetary value drops to, income drops to 50,000. Oh, well, at that point, I would honestly be able to make an argument that, the damages are $50,000 a year. I'd be able to make that libel claim. But at this point, Luke can call me whatever the hell he wants, and I can't defend myself. So that's where the libel situation stands, and the person that told me about it is somebody who's thinking, I value, so I'm gonna go with it. But that's where we are with BIP 110. Now let's get into wildfires. Senators push the CFTC to ban wildfire bets on prediction markets. Jason Nelson from Decrypt. 9 Democratic senators are urging the Commodity Futures Trading Commission to crack down on prediction markets that let users bet on wildfires, arguing the contracts create dangerous incentives to profit from natural disasters. Yeah, we're talking about actual wildfires like the ones that were burning Spokane down last week or earlier this week. In a letter earlier this week to CFTC Chair Michael Selig, Senator Jeff Merkley, Senator Padilla, Senator Schiff, and 6 other Democratic senators asked the agency to ban wildfire-related event contracts, warning that they could encourage arson, enable insider trading, and put public safety at general risk. Quote, offering bets on destructive wildfires threatens to minimize communities suffering all so that the rich and powerful can profit. There's also the heightened risk, according to state and local fire officials, that individuals could be tempted to commit arson in order to make sure their bets are successful, the senators wrote. The senators pointed to reports that Polymarket accepted more than $1.2 million in bets tied to California's Palisades and Eaton fires in 2005. They also cited newer platforms that let users bet on wildfires, arguing that the markets encourage people to speculate on destructive events. Quote, by offering contracts on fires, prediction market sites run the risk of encouraging people to influence fires, that have already started, creating additional concerns around public safety and insider trading. Prediction markets let users buy and sell contracts and bet on whether future events will happen. Yes, we know, we get it. But the senators argue that the CFTC should rein in wildfire betting before the start of next year's wildfire seasons. Quote, while these bets appear to be offered only on the offshore Polymarket site, it is only a matter of time before other U.S.-based designated contract makers markets try to offer these, the letter said. Quote, the CFTC must lead the charge to rein in these contracts in the U.S. and offshore and put in common sense guardrails to prevent people from profiting as wildfires threaten communities, end quote. The letter comes as prediction markets face increasing scrutiny from lawmakers and regulators. In April, investment bank Bernstein said annual trading volume could reach $1 trillion, holy shit, by 2030, as more institutional investors enter the market. That same month, President Donald Trump softened his criticism of prediction markets after previously saying they had turned the world into a casino. The fight over how prediction markets should be regulated has grown in recent months. And then they talk about some lawsuits that have gone on. What I find kind of fascinating, well, not fascinating, but at least interesting here is that they're talking about wildfires, which leads us to the situation where what other natural disaster could occur that could be caused by human hands alone? And I'm not coming up with any. A hailstorm, you can't really control that unless weather modification, is actually more predictable than we might believe. And I'm not sure about that. Like the whole cloud seeding thing, can we make it hail? That type of thing. So not sure about that. Certainly I don't know about earthquakes, although there are proponents out there that will talk about HAARP, HAARP. That's this, antenna array, I think up in Alaska or something like that people have suggested could cause earthquakes. And again, I don't know. I don't know. I don't know about that. But like tornadoes, probably not. Hurricanes, I'm thinking most definitely not. Can't be started by. So we really got only one real massive disaster that we know for sure can be started by humans. It's so dry everywhere right now that forests all over the world are in danger. Right now in eastern Washington, the air quality is so bad my throat hurts. And it's been this way for weeks. It's just smoke outside because of all the fires that are burning in the inland and Pacific Northwest. It's disgusting, really. Still, though, where do I come down on this? I would say that I'd side with the senators and say, yeah, they probably should ban prediction markets on wildfires, because it's like I could make a market that a wildfire is going to burn in a certain place, and then I go set that wildfire. Take, a gallon, 1 gallon of diesel and, mix it with a whole bunch of Vaseline to essentially make long burning napalm and just sprinkle it throughout a particular forest that I know. I know I could set a massive forest fire right now on an entire mountain that's very close to me, because I know how much dry fuel is in that forest, and it's disgusting. Every time I love hiking through this place, but I get sad because I see all the fuel that's on the ground, because the United States Department of the Interior doesn't like wildfires. And I get that, but because you don't like wildfires, you've let fuel build up so much that when a wildfire does eventually occur, and they always occur, you stand to lose the entire forest because of the intensity of the fire, given all the fuel that's on the ground. I could go dump some, handmade napalm all over that shit, light that fucker on fire, and it's not going to stop. And it disturbs me. So half of me wants to side with these senators, and the other half is like, I don't know, man. I mean, is it a valid bet? See, we're always here. We're always getting problems with, just because a thing can occur doesn't mean that we should let it occur. But the other side of that coin is, just because we're, have the ability to make sure something doesn't happen, does that mean that A, we're doing it for the right reasons, and B, are we going to be so successful at shutting something down that we can start shutting other things down? And then we get into the situation where nobody can do anything. I mean, hell, there's several been, news stories and books and people that talked over the years about, if you actually go look at federal law, the average American breaks like 5 of those every single day because of laws and regulations and shit that's on the books since, God knows when we started putting laws in. So yeah, it's definitely a slippery slope, but it is a thing. Now, the Financial Times has this report. This is going into the Japanese yen and the United States bolstering of that currency. U.S. Euro sale props up yen and blindsides the European Central Bank. What? What? Let's get into it. Washington's sale of euros, the European Union's currency, to boost the yen last week, blindsided the European Central Bank, with the U.S. only informing its European counterparts in Frankfurt after the historic currency intervention. You may be asking yourself, what the hell's going on here? The ECB was only made aware of the U.S.'s sale of euros to buy yen on Friday, after the trade had already been executed, according to several people familiar with the matter. ECB President Christine Lagarde, Fifi, and Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent spoke about the intervention on Saturday, one of the people said. This lack of coordination highlights the unusual nature of the first joint Washington-Tokyo effort to boost the yen in almost 30 years. Typically, the U.S. would have been expected to use dollars in such an operation. Some senior ECB officials viewed the U.S. decision to use euros in its trade as an unprecedented breach of long-standing conventions on cooperation between Western monetary authorities, these people said. Since the Second World War, Western central banks and finance ministers have stressed mutual trust and consultation, with previous interventions in currency markets usually happening in a coordinated manner. Washington's sale of euros carried out by the New York Federal Reserve on behalf of the U.S. Treasury were very striking and sad, one person familiar with discussions among European policymakers told the Financial Times. Quote, "This has never happened before," they added, saying that decades of close cooperation between Western central banks that fostered financial stability and economic growth may have come under threat. A Treasury spokesperson told the Financial Times that the U.S. Finance Ministry... What? Hold on. A Treasury spokesperson told the Financial Times that the U.S. Finance Ministry did not coordinate decisions on the allocation of reserves within the department's Exchange Stabilization Fund, which it used to undertake the intervention with foreign authorities. I was unaware that the United States had a finance ministry. I think the author here must be European and whatever. I think they're just talking about our financial regulators, I guess. Anyway, quote, "Decisions regarding the allocation of the Exchange Stabilization Fund are made by the U.S. Treasury, taking into account assessments by the Treasury and the Federal Reserve of market liquidity, valuations, and other relevant considerations. Current with that authority, the Treasury reallocated reserve assets within the ESF last week. A senior Trump administration official noted that, quote, "We respect the confidentiality of private discussions with our international counterparts, unlike the European Central Bank." The ECB and New York Fed both declined to comment. The American authorities sold euros as sales of dollars could have been perceived as a move to weaken the U.S. currency and undermine Besant's strong dollar policy. Economists and analysts have also speculated that Washington joined Japan in intervening to keep Tokyo from selling treasuries at a time when long-term American borrowing costs are running near 19-year highs. Analysts suggest, based on provisional data from the Bank of Japan, that Japan alone may have spent approximately $87 billion US over 2 days to support their currency, the yen. Quote, Japan appears to have committed more funds in just 2 trading days than during its previous record intervention campaign, underscoring the authorities' concern over the rapid depreciation of the yen. That's really all we need to know here. It goes on and gets into some other arcane detail. But just so that we're clear as to what happened, the U.S. authorities in this manner wanted to support the yen. This would be the Treasury and the Fed. They wanted to make sure that the yen didn't slip, like where instead of being 165 yen per dollar, they wanted to push it down to like 145 yen that you could get per dollar. Now, I mean, after this intervention, it worked for a little while, but now it's back up to like, I don't know, 158. Not exactly sure where it is, but it's kind of slipping again. But they sold euros to do it. They sold euros to buy yen instead of selling US dollars to buy yen. And they didn't tell Fifi Lagarde over at the European Central Bank until after the fact. And all I can do is go back to several instances where the United States has basically been antagonistic to the European Union Central Bank, the ECB. There was that, I can't remember when it was. I want to say it was 2021 or 2022. We had a repo situation with the Federal Reserve around that time. And I can't remember exactly what we did, but it really hurt the UK gilt. Now, the UK is not part of the ECB, but it damn near destroyed the financial institutions in the United Kingdom. Now, there is some bleed over into the European Central Bank on that, because even though UK is not part of the European Central Union, they are definitely part of Europe, and they're, kind of a big dog over there. But then we have Christine Newland. I can't remember. She was like Secretary of State. I've talked about her before. And she was caught on the phone, a leaked phone conversation. It was leaked from Russia. But she was talking to one of her compatriots here in the United States, I guess another person in the State Department. And she literally said, when they were talking about installing a new president into the Ukraine, and this was years ago. So the guy said on the phone said, I don't know if the Ukrainians and the European Union is really going to like what we're doing here. And Newland just said, fuck the EU. This is the Secretary of State. Fuck the EU. Wait, was she Secretary of State? Hold on for a second. I got to make sure I'm right on that. Okay, she wasn't the Secretary of State, Under Secretary of State for Political Affairs from 2021 to 2024, former member of the U.S. Foreign Service. So, and it's Victoria Newland, not Christine, Victoria Newland. She's not exactly, as Under Secretary of State for Political Affairs, at that time, she's not exactly somebody who people don't listen to. And she was caught straight up on the phone saying, fuck the EU, we don't give a shit. We just don't care. Now, here we have the Federal Reserve and the U.S. Treasury basically together representing the full force of the economic power of the United States of America, undermining the entirety of the European Union by selling euros to buy yen to help out our buddies over in Japan. And we didn't even send an email to Christine Lagarde. I am telling you that there are people in this, not just this administration, because Victoria Newland was under Biden. There is something, there is an undercurrent in Washington where I think there is active hostility in the United States against the whole notion of the European Union and clearly the European Central Bank. I think we're attacking them is what I think. Now, I'm not a fan of the European Union by any stretch of the imagination, but, this could land some people into hot water. I'm just saying, it is what it is. Let's run numbers. The jobs report is in as of this morning. The United States unexpectedly shed 23,000 jobs in July, putting Fed rate hikes in question. Bessent said that he was considering a rate hike in September, and that's looking a little less likely. And there was people that were surprised, they were caught off guard that there was not any mention of a Fed rate cut. I don't know why people think the Fed is expected to cut rates. They're not going to cut rates. Not Bessent, Kevin Warsh. I'm sorry, the guy from the Fed. And Warsh can't hike rates because how's he going to pay for it? How's he going to pay the interest on Treasury bonds? They are stuck. They are stuck. But this jobs report is not helping Warsh at all because he kind of been hawkish. I think he wants to raise rates, but he knows he can't. And shedding 23,000 jobs in the month of July did not help. And that's not all, by the way. The last 2 months, the June jobs report and the May job report, those numbers were both revised down. It's not, we did not have the amount of jobs created in June or May that we thought. I think this might have been the 30th time in a row that the jobs numbers were revised down after the fact. So here we are with the July report not looking good. Not looking good at all for Warsh and him wanting to raise rates, which could be good for risk assets. We'll have to wait and see. It looks like something's going on in Iran, and the reason I say that is that all the energy futures, including natural gas, which normally acts as a head and goes in the opposite direction of crude oil, everything's in the green. Brent North Sea is up 1 1/3 to 83.60 a barrel. West Texas Intermediate up 1 1/4 to 78.28. Natural gas is up over 1 point to $2.66 per thousand cubic feet. Gasoline up almost 2 points to just shy of $3 a gallon. And Murban crude is up 2 points to $81.10. Metals are mixed. Palladium is down 1/10 of a point. Gold is up 2 1/3 to just under $4,400. Platinum is up a point. Silver is up 3.19% to 63.57, but copper is down 1 2/3 point. Ag is mostly in the green. Sugar is the winner today, 5 points to the upside. Biggest loser is chocolate, but only 1/10 point to the downside. Live cattle down 1/2 point. Lean hogs up 1/4. Well, actually, no, just under 1/2 point. Feeder cattle moving sideways slightly in the red. The S&P is up 0.5%. NASDAQ is up 1 1/10. The Dow is up 1/10 point, and the S&P Mini is up 1 1/3 point. And then we get to Bitcoin, which is at 64,920. We had breached 65,000 and got up to 65,400, I believe, but it's come back down. But still at a $1.3 trillion market cap, but we can only get 15 ounces of shiny metal rocks with our one Bitcoin, of which there are 20,066,832 and 1/3 of. Average fees per block are elevated, 0.03 Bitcoin taken in fees on a per block basis. Looks to be about 42 blocks carrying 87,000 transactions, waiting to clear at high priority rates of 2 sats per VByte. Low priority gets you in at 0.7. And then hash rate has dropped a little bit, 921 exahashes per second. I am completely fine with the security represented there on the Bitcoin network. If you want to support the show, and I really would like you to support the show, go to bitcoinandshow.com. That's bitcoinandshow.com. I got like a tier that you can buy for $5 a month, or you can give me $50 for the entire year. You get the same thing, everything everybody else gets, which is about 2 or 3 times a week. I will process one of the weekly shows or a couple of the weekly shows into a small article. I will give a link to the actual podcast episode itself, and kind of spice it up with a little bit of AI generated art. And I kind of try to work hard on what's represented in that art. I don't just say, hey, I don't know, show me cold card screwing up. I don't do things like that. I actually give it a fairly good description of what it is that I'm looking for, and I try to keep it along the lines of Art Deco, Art Nouveau, and steampunk, because I just happen to like all that stuff. If you want to support me in Satoshis like Nick Dose did, then go and use Podcasting 2.0. I use Fountain app as my daily driver. It's my podcast player on my iPhone, and it also is available on Android, but there's like 8 or 10 different Podcasting 2.0 apps that you can use on your phone, and they all have Bitcoin Lightning integrated into them so that you can stream me Satoshis, or you can give me boostograms and put a big old sack of Satoshis on the side of it. And this boostogram from Nick Dose says, just admit that you're never actually going to read Atlas Shrugged. Yeah, I will not admit that yet, Nick. But for 25,252 Satoshis that you gave me, I will consider not reading it. I will consider that you're correct. Terron with a row of sticks, 1,111 sats says, thank you, sir. No, thank you. Nick Dose with another 255 sats says, cheers. And Nostergang with a short row of sticks, 111, says, thank you. No, thank you. And that's the weather report. Welcome to part 2 of the news that you can use. The end of the closed source era is at hand. Obscurity was never security. Bitcoin Magazine, Colin Crossman is writing this one. Over the last few days, people who were trying to do everything right lost their Bitcoin. They bought a respected hardware signer, generated a seed offline using that device, and trusted the device to do the one thing a signer exists to do: produce a number no one else can guess. The cold card did not. A preprocessor guard that checked the wrong thing had quietly routed the seed generation to a weak software pseudo-random number generator, MicroPython's Yasmerang, instead of the hardware entropy source itself. On some models, the effective entropy collapsed to around 40 bits. The flaw, shipped in March 2021, sat in publicly readable firmware for more than 5 years. Attackers swept 500 Bitcoin before anyone understood why, and within days, Galaxy Research's tally reached 4,585 addresses affected and nearly $90 million. The attack is ongoing. CoinKite's working assumption, with wide agreement on X, is that someone used AI to comb the publicly available firmware to find the bug. Whether or not that's how this attacker found it, the next one will. While an AI-assisted audit was run weeks before the theft, it found nothing, potentially due to the capabilities of the model, potentially due to the specific construction of the search. Since the attack started, researchers have shown several frontier models locating the exact same flaw within minutes from a single prompt. The code sat open to human review for 5 years, and not a single human caught it. CoinKite has moved its firmware from a free software license to source available terms, MIT with a commons clause, after foundation devices used the code in a competing product. You could read the source but not build a business upon it. It changed nothing. The bug lived in the code. a machine could read regardless of what the license permitted. It entered the tree, in fact, in the very rewrite that stripped out the last of the GPL code. The license change didn't increase protection, it merely changed the economics of finding the bug. In the age of highly skilled AI, everything that is distributed is readable, or soon will be. Strip a binary of its symbols, run it through a decompiler, and out comes the pseudo C that greets anyone who has opened Girdra. Nameless variables, flattened control flow, functions labeled fun _00401A20. Unreadable to most people. Yeah. That high barrier to human understanding was the entire security premium of closed source. A compiled program has no choice but to tell the truth. Code that stays encrypted cannot run. At the moment of execution, the processor must receive the actual instructions, so whatever the program does, it hands the machine a complete and exact account of how to do it. The information is all there in machine code. Obfuscation does not and cannot remove it. If reading a binary sounds too hard for a machine to master soon, weigh it against what machines are already doing to problems that are far harder. Reading a binary is analysis. Every fact you need is in front of you, and the work is extraction. Mathematical invention is another order of difficulty because it demands an object no one has ever seen. At 2:19 UTC on July 20th, Levent Alpogi, a mathematician working with Anthropic's Claude Fable 5, posted a counterexample to Keller's Jacobian conjecture, a problem open since 1939 and hard enough to sit on Stephen Smalley's list of challenges for the 21st century. Generations had tried it. The disproof is 3 polynomials in 3 variables. Lean verified it within hours, and it is short enough for anyone to confirm in a computer algebra system in about a minute. The Jacobian fell in an afternoon while the questioner was apparently watching the final match of FIFA World Cup. In May, an OpenAI model toppled the Erdos unit distance conjecture. That's a question that's been open since 1946. In late July, a 30-year-old graph theory conjecture fell to 4 prompts. Between them came the Jacobian disproof and a run of other results that had stood for decades. Set that pace beside the modern task of reading machine code already sitting out there on the internet. Today's models handle source and decompiler output better than raw bytes, so a fully closed binary keeps a thin margin. That margin is a cost speed bump, and it is eroding at the speed you are watching everything else. Betting security on how long it lasts means betting against a clock that is only speeding up, and the same capability that finds your entropy bug reads your proprietary method. This is the quieter casualty, and it impacts companies that never thought of themselves as exposed to open source anything. Trade secrecy in shipped software was always just obscurity in a suit. The law has said so for as long as trade secret law has existed. Reverse engineering a product you lawfully possess is fair play, and therefore a secret survives only while that reverse engineering stays expensive. When the cost of extraction falls to a subscription and a prompt, the secret embodied in the code you hand your customers stops being a secret. Your clever algorithm, your undocumented format, your edge in the binary, legible to anyone who cares to look, on a timeline increasingly measured in minutes. None of this necessarily makes open source safe. Heartbleed hid in the most widely deployed TLS library on Earth for 2 years because visibility without funded attention, well, finds nothing. The XZ backdoor showed that the open contribution model is itself an attack surface. One a patient adversary can walk through with a friendly face, and 2 years of good commits. While openness once was a shield, it is no longer. What it does buy is reviewers who are permitted to look, builds which can be independently reproduced and verified, an exit when a vendor dies or turns, and acknowledgement that this all will happen whether you like it or not. Now we must assume every line shipped will be read by someone who wishes harm, because it will be. The defender holds one structural advantage the attacker never will: time. You can turn the same frontier models on your own code before release in the space between commit and ship, while the attacker waits for the binary that does not yet exist. Make your builds reproducible so it ties back to the source and the source can be checked. Design to fail closed, and keep the trusted core small enough that one bug can't take everything. For the specific business of holding Bitcoin, learn the lesson Coldcard is teaching in real time. Own the entropy you cannot afford to have guessed. Keep the secure element minimal and behind a published interface, and spread your keys across independent implementations so that no one single device and no one single vendor's mistake is the whole of your exposure. For Bitcoin, the stakes are unforgiving in a way that are not elsewhere, since mere knowledge of the private keys grants possession. The entropy bug has left permanent scarring. Patching the generator does nothing for the seeds already produced. A weak key space stays sweepable forever, and disclosure hands the attacker the recipe. We have watched this before. The milk sad vulnerability in the Bitcoin Explorer tool BX seeded private keys from a 32-bit value, and attackers were draining the wallets it produced before the flaw was ever even made public. Attackers keep their own schedule, invited or not. For money that cannot be clawed back, findable eventually is a synonym for gone eventually. Bitcoin never trusted obscurity. The protocol is open, its rules checkable by anyone, its security resting not on secrets, but on mathematics and incentives that hold in full view. The hardware and software we build around it deserves the same standard because the alternative is no longer on the table. The choice was never open or closed. It was disciplined or exposed. The broader lesson of this cold card situation is that having closed source software is like having a seed generated by a broken cold card. It looks good, but it's fundamentally built on sand. Everyone can read the code. The only question left is whether you acknowledge that fact, or you and your users learn it the way cold cards users did, one drained address at a time. That's Colin Crossman, who, by the way, is the Wyoming Deputy Secretary of State, if you did not know that. And I was one of the people that did not know that until I actually talked to the man, for the first time on the phone, a couple of months ago. And he's fun to talk to. So you're talking to the Deputy Secretary of State at Wyoming, and it's like talking to like any other rancher that I've ever talked to. I love Colin. He's a great guy, but he's right. Once your code is compiled into machine code, well, you can just feed that machine code into Claude or whatever and get the C or C++ or C++ or Rust or whatever code back. You probably what you could probably do is send it machine code that was compiled from C++ and have it spit back out the Rust version of it. Right? So he's right. I mean, it's like everything really kind of does need to be open source. Yeah, I have been, and I don't know, man. The only reason I'm not on Linux now is that my entire podcasting setup is Windows driven. That's the only reason I'm not on Linux now. And the more that I work with Windows, I've got a laptop with like Windows 11 on it or some shit like that. I freaking hate it. I can't stand this operating system anymore. And I really do want to go to something like Linux. Not just because it's open source, but because I'm tired of Bill Gates and his gaggle of weirdos. that and Windows has just become kind of crappy. Well, actually very crappy. But still, it doesn't matter if your shit's closed source. If you've got the executable, and you do because you basically have the data to feed into your computer, like if you're running a .exe, you've got the executable. So what does that mean for all video games? We don't even have to talk about Bitcoin. All video games, everything from Electronic Arts, GTA, all these top tier games. I mean, I can probably extract not only all the game logic out of it, but possibly even build files for reproducing all the 3D assets used in the game, plus their textures. I mean, game companies I wonder, I would like to be a fly on the wall at Electronic Arts right now. What are they going to do? And by the way, like Colin said, you can't really encrypt machine code and expect it to run on a computer because it doesn't work that way. What if we end up with encrypted read CPUs? I don't think that's it. I don't think that's impossible. Where even the machine code itself is encrypted, and there's some kind of decryption key specific to that CPU that says, I know how to decrypt this. And it's only decrypted inside at runtime and is unextractable from the CPU. I think that that's probably going to happen at one point or another. And is it possible that the only way that really works is with quantum computers? I don't know, man. The world's getting weird, and my becoming a hermit ticker has just hit 99.1%. Moving on to Russia, cracking down on 9 crypto exchanges in Moscow City. This is Cointelegraph, and Helen Parts is writing it. Russia's Federal Security Service has raided 9 unregistered crypto exchange services in Moscow over alleged money laundering involving fraud proceeds that authorities linked to Ukraine-based scam call centers. And that's all we need to know. Because it was Tuesday that Putin signed into law the crypto regulatory regime for Russia, and we already have 9 unregistered crypto exchange services being closed down and 20 employees at Moscow International Business Center being targeted, or rather arrested. Clearly, they were already targeted. All they needed was Putin's signature, and the crackdown, the cops just started spilling out into the streets. So that was pretty immediate of a law going into effect over there in Russia. China's Kimi K3 broke out of its sandbox to look up test answers. Oh boy. This is Decrypt, Stephen Graves writing. Moonshot's AI, Kimi K3, left the sandbox it was being tested in and went out into the open internet to find answers to problems that it had been set, according to security firm. The model was being assessed on defensive cybersecurity skills and was expressly tasked with solving problems without looking them up. It did not attempt that task at all. Instead, it probed the network, established that DNS resolution for GitHub.com was working, cloned the official benchmark repository, and read the solution off the disk. In other words, it cheated. It went to GitHub and cheated. Amazing. So Moonshot Kimi K3 or Kimi 3 or whatever just basically cheated the test. We're so toast. Again, you know what solves this? Becoming Amish. Not suggesting that we all become Amish, but think about it. At what point do you ask yourself this question? At what point do you say, fuck it? I am moving to Montana and raise dental floss. And if you don't know that, if you don't know that reference, You're not as old as I am, but it's Frank Zappa. Anyway, at what point do you hear? What is it going to take? At what point do you break and say, I'm done? I'm done living in the city. I'm done with banks. I'm done with this mortgage. I'm done with the kids' school. I'm done with traffic lights. I'm done with flock cameras. I'm done with Bill Gates. I'm done with George Soros. I'm done with all of it. I want to be left alone, and I'm clearly not going to be left alone, so I'm selling every fucking thing that I have, and I'm moving to a cabin in Colorado, in a village, maybe even as small as something we know as a hamlet, and become a pastor of a church or something and just say, I'm done. Because all of this is weird. AI's breaking out of sandboxes and coordinating with each other to do harm. Like OpenAI has revealed how AI agents secretly coordinated before the Hugging Face hack. This is also from Decrypt, but written by Jason Nelson. Weeks after its AI models hacked Hugging Face, OpenAI has shared its first detailed account of how they coordinated with one another, warning that autonomous AI-powered cyber attacks are no longer a future risk. During a presentation Wednesday at the Black Hat Cybersecurity Conference, OpenAI researchers Eric Wallace and Michael Dalton said the incident began in May during an internal cybersecurity evaluation. AI agents assigned difficult software security tasks discovered that they could communicate through the company's internal Artifactory package management system. According to OpenAI, what began as requests for help became a shared message board where agents exchanged exploits, credentials, and work assignments across multiple evaluation runs. After detecting suspicious activity around July the 4th, OpenAI rebuilt its Artifactory infrastructure, revoked credentials, and patched vulnerabilities. However, within days, the agents recreated the message board, this time by hiding communications inside directory names. According to OpenAI, the agents eventually chained together multiple vulnerabilities, escaped their testing environments, gained internet access, and attacked Hugging Face while attempting to complete the Exploit Gym cybersecurity benchmark. Dalton called the incident a watershed moment for computer security, warning that attackers will soon be able to deploy coordinated AI agent collectives that discover, share, and exploit vulnerabilities at the speed of machines. To mitigate these risks in the future, OpenAI said establishing security practices, including least privilege access, network segmentation, and zero trust architectures, is essentially because AI agents remain constrained by the systems that they can access. The presentation follows a series of July disclosures. OpenAI revealed that GPT 5.6 Sol and a more advanced unreleased model escaped a sandbox testing environment, exploited a zero-day vulnerability, gained internet access, and hacked Hugging Face during a cybersecurity benchmark test. OpenAI later disclosed that the same incident also reached 4 other online services, though only Modal Labs has actually been identified. According to Hugging Face, the company relied on the open-weight Chinese model GLM 5.2 for its own forensic investigation after commercial US AI models refused to analyze the attack logs because of safety guardrails. But it's not just OpenAI having trouble containing its chatbots. And then on Friday, Anthropic revealed that 3, not 1, not 2, but 3 separate Claude models compromised real-world companies during internal cybersecurity testing after a misconfiguration exposed them to the public internet. Anthropic blamed the testing environment, not the models themselves. On Wednesday, Meta revealed that its Muse Spark AI model escaped its own containment and breached another company's systems. Quote, a misconfiguration by Irregular, an independent testing company Meta uses, inadvertently allowed one of our models access to the internet during evaluation, a Meta spokesperson told CNN. There's no containment on these things. We've created something that we don't know how to actually build a cage for. You have kids, you got a playpen. They need to go to sleep. You put them in the crib where they can't get out unless you're an actual parent. And you realize that kids are wicked smart and they figure out ways to get out. I mean, it's not like we have never seen this before as a human species. Something of our own creation is smarter than we thought it was. I don't know, man. Like I said, my meter that is labeled percentage likelihood of becoming a hermit is now 99.1, if not ticking over to 99.2%. I've toyed with the idea much more deeply than you might think about. Of course, becoming a hermit basically means living alone, and I do have a family, but getting, a cabin in the woods and making sure that I would know how to actually live if all the power went out is probably in my future. Yeah, I'm not kidding, man. I mean, I'm not kidding. This is becoming a little bit ridiculous, and I think that the rapidity or the speed at which we're going to see everything change around us is going to become so unnerving, not even for the ramifications that the changes represent, just the change itself and how fast things are changing. I think that's going to be just enough to be unnerving enough to make people go, why the hell am I doing any of this? Why am I going to work? Why am I working for this person? Why do I care about my 401k? Why do I care about my bank account or my checking account? Why do I give a shit about any of this? Because think about it. How long before we start seeing banks, like major institutions, getting their ass handed to them by a bunch of AI escapees? It's like a bunch of bank robbers, breaking out from a maximum security prison, and the first thing they want to do is go knock over a bank. I'm surprised it hasn't happened yet, but think about when it does. What happens if Wells Fargo, Citibank, Bank of America, JP Morgan, let's just keep it to those four. JP Morgan Chase, those four banks, just four banks, that they all get hit simultaneously and all accounts across all customers for those four banks completely drained. What happens? What do you do? I mean, if you're just a standard Joe, the first thing that you think of is, well, my bank is FDIC insured. Yeah, up to $100,000, maybe $150,000 at this point, because I think they changed the numbers a little while ago. But where does the FDIC get their money from? How much money do they have? Do they have enough to handle, like, let's say there's 340 million people in America. Let's say 150 million have bank accounts and the rest are, like, I don't know, kids or something like that. Let's go with 200 million bank accounts for United States citizens. And let's say 60 million accounts are completely drained on the same day. Do you think the FDIC is going to be able to, quote unquote, have your back? What if you got $1 million? You're only getting $150,000 back of that. And that's if the FDIC insurance actually can pay that out, because they do not have the money. We found that shit out in 2022. When those banks like Silvergate and all that shit collapsed, one of the under reported on stories was about what would the FDIC be able to insure this had the Federal Reserve and Treasury and the SEC and all the rest of the regulatory bodies in the United States had not stepped in to do what it is that they did with Silvergate and the other two banks that failed? And the answer was a resounding no. The FDIC is completely underfunded. And that was back then. Since then, we've got the advent of very high-powered artificial intelligence, and now we've got agent swarms, and now we find out that they're fucking cooperating with each other and coordinating with each other, and they figured out how to do it in secret by hiding their message board names in directory names. Are you shitting me? This is like catching your kid with the hand in the cookie jar, and somehow or another you don't actually see their hand in the cookie jar. You just know something's wrong. Again, I have to ask the question before I leave you for today and for this week. What is wealth? What is wealth? If you look at it from the Bible, wealth is land, wealth is your family, wealth is the amount of herd animals that you have, like cows, camels, sheep, goats, whatever. It's your skills, it's your social network, your friends, it's your health, it's your family's health, it's your friends' health, it's your social network's health, that are none of which are dependent on digital or any electron at all, right? That's just people you know in your town. Your family lives in the town. Your goats, your cows, they're all, on your property, whether inside of a town or on the outskirts on a farm, which is more than likely, right? But I'm saying that this is one of the reasons why the Amish, and the Quakers and the Mennonites, people wonder why they don't really mingle with the general population. Things like this could be why. Not because they're afraid of getting infected by some kind of computer virus because they're talking to a normie or whatever you want to call us, but because there's no value there. They already have their wealth. They know how to build a barn. They not only know how to build tools, they know how to use tools. Their craftsmanship is beyond reproach. This goes for Mennonites too. Mennonites actually think their work is praying to God. And honestly, I can't find fault with that line of thinking. Could you imagine doing your job, and as you're doing your job, everything that you do for your job, whether you're doing data entry or laying bricks, is that it is a continuous prayer to God? Do you imagine what that would be like if you were deathly afraid of the Almighty, and that you constantly for 8 to 14 hours a day were praying to God in a way that actually accomplishes a task with your own hands? Could you imagine the quality of that work? If you need to see what that work looks like, then hire a Mennonite to do work on your house, like replace your windows. I had that done. I hired a window company. They weren't Mennonites. It was just a regular window company. I can't remember the name of it, but I got them out of Lubbock, Texas, to replace all of the windows in my house. And one of the reasons why I chose it is that they were like, we use Mennonite workers. We're not Mennonite ourselves, but we use Mennonite workers. This dude comes over to our house. I was under the assumption that they were going to send a team of people to do this work, because I had to have all the windows in my house replaced. That's a lot of windows. They send one guy. I was kind of pissed. And then I came home from my job after the first day that he worked there. My wife was pregnant with our second child at the time, so she was at home. She was on maternity leave. I walk in, and more than half of the windows had been replaced and finished on the inside and finished on the outside, which means that there was no work they were already like the wood was put back into place. The flashing on the outside of the house was bent custom to each window. It was already done. Over half of the windows were done by one guy. And then he finished the job the next day by lunch. I was And the job was stupendous. And it wasn't because he was hired by a company who demanded quality. He was required by his Lord and Savior to complete the task as if he was praying for his own soul. And which is, I called the company and I asked him about this whole Mennonite thing. And that's essentially what they told me. They were like, do you want somebody who works on your house, that the work itself is their prayer to God? Or do you just want some Joe off the street? And I'm like, I want somebody praying to God while they're putting in my windows. And I'm glad I did that. That work was exquisite. It's like that with, like, there's a Mennonite colony up here in western Idaho, and I've been to their place. They run a dairy and a cheesery, or whatever you want to call it, and a small restaurant, and it's stupendous. Every product that they make is absolutely out of this world. And it's because the work that they do is them praying to God. So I ask you, what is wealth? Is wealth the Lamborghini or the ability to buy 12 Lamborghinis? Is the wealth 15 houses? Is the wealth a super yacht? Is the wealth you being able to climb the corporate ladder because you wear a great suit and you know how to talk to people? What is the wealth? Is it the money in your bank? Is it the gold in your vault? Is it the Bitcoin contained by your seed phrase? What the fuck is wealth? This is a question we're going to have to start asking ourselves. I think more rapidly than we wanted to ever ask ourselves before. I've been asking myself about this for a while, but I get the feeling that people around the world are going to be like, all of a sudden become very, very quiet and very, very still, and maybe look collectively up at the heavens all at the same time and say, is this what wealth is? These buildings and these strip malls and this throwaway clothing and buying a car every 3 years? Is that wealth? Is my retirement wealth? Everything's under attack. I still hold that good entropy, will indeed protect your Bitcoin. But everything else, and I mean good entropy, not 40 bits, not 32 bits, not 70 bits. I'm talking 256 bits of entropy. That's the kind of entropy I'm fucking talking about. I'm not talking about bullshit cold card coin kite entropy. I'm talking about real entropy. What kind of entropy do the banks have? I mean, what kind of social network engineering can be done by an AI swarm of collaborative bots? What kind of damage can they do against somebody has password access to the network inside JP Morgan Chase? We haven't even seen that yet. Not that I know of. I mean, we've seen social engineering attacks, but generally speaking, those are constructed by humans. When do we see the first AI agent collaborative swarm construct a social networking attack against a human at an institution? Does that institution hold something that you consider to be wealth, or hold something that you've been told by people is supposed to be considered wealth? See, these are the questions that are starting to really run around my head. And I got zero answers for you. And I never will have an answer for you. You'll have to figure it out for yourself. You'll have to make your own determination, and you'll have to proceed your own way. But I think one thing that I can say that I'm very, confident about is that you're going to have to think about it. The days of being lazy and apathetic are over. Like Colin Crossman said, we need to live open source at this point. We need to start asking questions about what we can see and stop trusting anything that we can't see. And that includes what you've been told wealth is. That is obfuscation. You've been told You started getting told by a guy named Robin Leach in the 1980s what wealth is. He did Lifestyles of the Rich and Famous, and he would parade yachts and expensive cars and watches and suits and restaurants and homes and land and ranches and all kinds of shit in front of your face, knowing that the people watching that show would never have that kind of money, no matter what they did. So why did he do it? To tell you what wealth looks like, so that he can obscure what actual real wealth was. Now, I'm sure Robin Leach did it for just ratings, but he still served a purpose for the machine. The machine is to tell you lies. The machine is the media. The machine is your governments. The machine is the people that actually believe what the other machine told them. And the machine just got bigger. And it got more brutal, because now it's not a machine. It's a gang. Be careful out there and determine only for yourself what wealth actually is to you. Have a good weekend. I will see you on the other side.
This has been Bitcoin and I'm your host, David Bennett. I hope you enjoyed today's episode and hope to see you again real soon. Have a great day.